Hey everybody, welcome. Today I'm going to be covering something very important if you feel like you've been struggling with depression or some type of chronic negative emotion that it keeps showing up in your life and you feel like the more you try to improve it and reduce it, the worse it tends to get or the more stuck you are. This training is going to be very powerful for you. So welcome. My name is Ty Hicks. If you don't know who I am, I'm a mental health coach, founder of mentalhealthcoaching.com. And I used to be depressed, suicidally depressed, have some anxiety issues, and thankfully I was able to learn how to train my brain to operate the way I want it to. And that's what I really believe in, is helping people learn how to have the mental health that they really deserve to have, because anybody can live depression and anxiety free. You just need to know how to do it. You need to know the skills and processes necessary to make that happen. So today I want to cover a simple little metaphor that I found really helps my clients a lot. And it clears up a big misconception that people have about what it really takes to live without depression. So one video I had put together a while back, I had focused on this one element that I called the biggest mental health hack I think I've discovered in my career. And this is a little bit of a riff off of that. What I was explaining in that particular training is I was talking about the importance to make sure that you focus on what it is that you actually desire and what you want, as opposed to what you fear and what you don't want. So a common example that will happen for people is, let's take anxiety for example. If somebody is dealing with anxiety, what they have a habit of doing is they get in their head and they focus on what they do not want to happen. So they will imagine some dangerous scenario taking place in the future, or they might imagine a relationship failing, or some type of, catastrophic thing taking place that they don't want to take place. And because they fear that taking place, they focus on it. The challenge is that the more that we focus on what we don't want, the more focal it becomes in our life. So the metaphor I like to use is if you're driving down an icy road and you hit a patch of ice and your car starts to spin and you head towards a tree. You don't want to hit the tree, but your mind is going to feel an inclination to stare right at the tree. But if you continue to stare right at the tree, i.e. what you are afraid of in this particular situation, then you're going to be that much more likely to hit the tree, right? Because your brain and your body will become more convinced that that's where you're headed, because that's what you're focused on, and that's where you'll go. So the key when you're dealing with a spin, whether you're in an actual car or whether you are in a metaphorical spin in your life, is to focus on what you want. So you focus on the desired outcome that you want. So in a similar capacity, depression does not go away the more we focus on depression. So to put that differently, focusing on I don't want to be depressed is not going to reduce depression. In fact, it can very often amplify it. So there's a age-old phrase that says, what you resist persists. So if you notice that you're feeling depressed and you start to focus on the fact that you don't want to feel depressed and you resist the sense that you're feeling depressed right now, that tends to amplify itself. You tend to make that problem larger because problems need energy to grow. So the metaphor that I found works really well with this is, imagine if you go into a very dark room and there's, it's totally dark, right? You wouldn't go into a totally dark room and say, you know what, it's too dark in here. We really need to get the darkness out of this room, right? No one would say that. What they would say is, hey, it's too dark in here. Someone turn on a light. Because what you might remember from middle school science class, right, is that there is no such thing as darkness. There is only the absence of light. What we perceive as darkness is literally just the absence of light. Much like cold, there is not such a thing as cold. There is only heat. And so cold is the sensation of there being no heat. The way you get rid of cold is not by going into a cold room and saying, hey, how do we get the cold out of here? No, you add heat, and as you add heat, the cold dissipates. When you're trying to make something less dark, you don't do that by reducing darkness. You do it by increasing light. Well, what I found is that this is exactly what happens with depression too. so much focus on traditional methods of dealing with depression have to do with focusing on trying to reduce the darkness. So it starts by putting this, giant medical diagnosis on it, and then we prescribe medication for it, and then we talk about it, and we talk about, oh gosh, what you must have had depression because of what happened in your childhood, and we make a whole big giant, story and case about what the issue is, and we focus more and more and more and more on the very thing that we don't want. And as we focus on it, problems need energy to grow. So we give the problem energy and it grows. The more we focus on that problem, the more focal it becomes in our life, the more it tends to predominate. So all of these methods and all of these historical ways that we've dealt with the issue have been very well intentioned, but they often have the byproduct of causing someone to feel more depressed or more anxious as opposed to less. Because somebody might have been dealing with a little pattern of depression, say when they were in their teens, and then they go through the rigmarole of, now I've got a diagnosis, and now I got treatment for it, and now I'm going through this, and now I've spent 30 years of my life focusing on my depression, right? And so the thing that we're not doing is turning the light on, right? Turning the light on here is the metaphor for increasing joy, right? If you will not ever feel less depressed by focusing on how do I reduce depression. The way you become less depressed is by focusing on how do I increase the positive feelings that I want to feel. Just like if you go into a dark room, you will not decrease the darkness by focusing on how do I get this darkness out of here. The way you decrease the darkness is you bring a light. And if you have a dimmer switch, right, you want to crank the light up. As you crank the light up, darkness recedes as the light expands. Depression recedes as joy expands, because the human nervous system has to have a particular emotional state that it is in at any given moment. And the way our mind operates is we have about 100,000 thoughts a day, and we're going to have 100,000 thoughts a day because our mind is focusing on something, right? We have to do something with these 16 hours that we're awake every single day. So we can either spend those 16 hours focusing on depression and all the things that make us feel depressed. And the more we do that, the more it's going to take up a lot of space. But as soon as we start to train the brain to feel more joy, now there's only 100,000 thoughts that can go around, right? There's only the capacity to feel essentially one or two emotions at any given time. So if we start to increase the percentage of joy that somebody feels, automatically what happens is the negative emotions recede. As light expands, darkness recedes. So as joy expands, depression recedes. And ironically, you will get a lot farther just simply trying to focus on, okay, well, what can I do that would bring me a little more joy? And if you stay on that train of thought, and you make your dominant focus, what else could I do to bring more fulfillment in my life? What could I do that I'd really enjoy this afternoon? What is a simple little thing? How would I really like to spend my mornings, right? The more you go down that train of thought and you come up with ideas and solutions and you start to implement, then the more you're going to cause the darkness, the depression, to recede. So one of the big differences as to why I'm able to help somebody get rid of their depression in a couple of months, whereas with traditional methods, they're dealing with it for years or decades, is I don't focus on the darkness. I focus on how do we actually get you more joy in your life, because that's what's more effective. All right? And a little rudimentary example of this, so I'll kind of close with this, is I want you to try a little thought experiment. Right now, no matter what, do not think about a purple elephant. Just don't do it. Do not, under any circumstances, think about a purple elephant. And if a purple elephant has come to your mind right now, then I want you to get rid of that thought right now. Do not think about that purple elephant. Okay? And as you go down this little thought experiment, you'll realize it's impossible. As soon as I tell you what not to do, your mind has to, first of all, think of the thing you don't want to think about and then try to dismiss it. And the more you try to dismiss it, it has to, again, bring it back into your mind and then try to dismiss it. So we do this with depression and anxiety all the time. We focus on the darkness. We give the problem energy. We focus on the purple elephant. However, which way you want to language it. We focus on the tree we don't want to hit. It's the same thing. The more you focus on what you don't want, the more you get what you don't want. When you focus on what you do want, you will get more of what you do want. And you can apply this all in other sorts of situations too. A common example would be relationships. If there's something that is bothering you in the relationship that you perceive as a problem or a communication flaw, what a lot of people do is they spend a lot of time in their head thinking about the problem that exists right now and how it's showed up in the past and how they're worried it will show up in the future. And so they continue to feed the problem energy and it becomes predominant and they expect the problem to persist. And then they end up getting stressed out and then they engage in a behavior that ends up further causing the problem in the relationship. As opposed to simply going, well, how do I want it to go in the relationship? How do I want to relate to this person? How do I want to connect with this person? How do I want it to feel? And what actions could I take to make that happen? So as with this whole light and darkness thing, we could use the exact same example in a relationship where we could say love and hate. You don't get rid of hate by focusing on hate and saying, oh, well, why do you hate them? What are you so hateful for? Interesting, right? What would be better is us to expand love, because as we expand love, right, our heart, our emotional heart as a metaphor, can only be filled up with so much of one thing, either dark or light. So as soon as we fill it back up with love, oh, well, the darkness goes away, the hate recedes. So you would be better served, I believe. It certainly worked for me personally in my own life and then also with my clients. You will be much better served if on your mental health journey, you do more to expand what you want as opposed to try to reduce and limit what you don't want. So anyway, I think that is a really interesting dynamic. I think this applies to lots of levels of humanity. And I think it's interesting because as a human being, we were gifted with this brain, but this brain is, I forget the exact evolutionary timeline, right? But like millions of years old. It's old. It is a survival-based mechanism. So our brain will have a priority of trying to avoid pain more than it will to pursue pleasure. That's why so much of humanity, it revolves around pain, right? It's why we see negative things in the news, because they know that that's what's going to grab our attention, right? It's why we're fed this stuff on social media, because it'll grab our attention. Our brain will do more to avoid pain than pursue pleasure. Like, you will do more to save yourself from losing $10,000 than you would to earn $10,000, right? That's because you want to avoid pain. So it's just our survival mechanism. But the beauty is, as a human being, we have a higher level of consciousness than, say, an animal that's just going to try to avoid pain. We have the ability to hack our conditioning, right? Our biological programming in a way, to an extent, right? We can choose at a higher level where we're going to put our energy and our time and our focus, what we are going to choose to believe, so that we don't have to let our reptile brain run us all the time. Okay, so make the habit of focusing more on what you do want and how to get more of what you do want, and you're going to be better served. So I'd love to hear your comments. Go ahead and write those in. Let us support you at a deeper level. And of course, if you're looking for some more individual help, you're always welcome to reach out and let us help you at mentalhealthcoaching.com. It's my pleasure to make sure we help as many people reach recovery as possible. So thanks for being a part of our community. Pass this on to somebody you think might need it. Save this for later, and I'll be excited to serve you and see you in the next one. See ya.